By the looks of it, they thought I was Jewish. So they took me to that camp, Majdanek, near Lublin. And I kept telling them, I'm Ukrainian. I hate the Jews the same as you do. And I went like this, and they believed it. So they didn't lock me up with the other Jews. They made me temporarily what they call a trustee. I'll help drive a truck to bring in supplies and take out trash from the camp. But they put a Ukrainian next to me on the seat with a gun. So for 2 weeks, I accumulate cigarettes and bought a bottle of vodka from a Polish person outside the gates. And one day we were traveling. We were supposed to go 18 miles to pick up some foodstuff. And I said to the Ukrainian, I'm going to pull over for a minute. I have stomachache. I got to find an outhouse. And he says, how long? How long? Who knows? What I'll do for you, I have 2 packs of cigarettes here, 2 packs of cigarettes, sit and smoke. You might as well take my bottle of vodka because I can't drink over there. And I gave him the bottle of vodka and I went into the field. I forgot to tell him that the outhouse is near Moscow. And I took off. When I crossed the border, the Russians picked me up as a spy. I didn't have a uniform, didn't have ID. It took quite a bit of doing. I convinced them I'm not a spy, and they let me go. And then I had one other incident. We went on a reconnaissance patrol of 4, and we fell behind the Nazi line and couldn't get back. And I was the only one that spoke German. So we hid out in the woods until we saw the German patrol. We overpowered the patrol. May I say it? We slit their throats, took their uniforms, dressed ourselves up in the Nazi uniforms, the Wehrmacht. And the officer of that patrol was a noble lieutenant. So I dressed myself as a noble lieutenant. That's the rank between a lieutenant and a captain. And rather than hide myself, I marched my men in the middle of the town, right past the Nazi headquarters. And I kept yelling, 1, 2, 3, 4, mach schnell, verfluchte Wetter. 1, 2, 3, 4, mach schnell, verfluchte Wetter. And I was 1, 2, 3, make it fast. And the Gestapo man that was in charge came out the front door, nice polished shoes. And when I saw him coming out, hi Hitler! He saluted me, and we went down. What we did, we walked around his building, and we were waiting for the mail plane. And that was one of those little planes, like a cup duster. Working for Stalin, we had to learn how to fly a plane or anything that moves on the water, on the ground, in the air, in the event of an emergency. That German pilot got out of the plane, he took out 4 bags of mail and left the plane running. What a mistake. We got on the plane, and when they heard the plane taking off, they came out with their machine guns and they started firing, but that time it was too late. When we landed on the Russian site, they took us as spies. We were in German uniforms. They locked us up. 48 hours in a basement filled with water up to here, up to chin, standing in cold water, naked. My skin was blue and shriveling already. And I kept telling the officer, call Stalin. Tell him you have me here. He said, well, you're nuts. Am I going to call Stalin? You want me to get shot? I can't call Stalin. I said, if you don't call, you're going to get shot. We went on a reconnaissance. I know you speak fluent Russian. I said, I also speak fluent German. That's why I went. Didn't believe me. Finally, to the end of the 48 hours, I said to him, Captain, call the colonel. Don't gamble on your life and your family. Ask the colonel to come in to talk to me. So the colonel came, and I said to him, I know you can't call Stalin. Call Beria. Tell him you have Alexander Vasilyevich Kontraktov in custody. He'll tell you what to do with me. Well, he called Beria, but everybody knew me as Sasha. They didn't know my last name. So Beria says, we don't have anybody. I said, call him back. Tell Beria to ask Stalin. He'll know who I am. So he called him back. That's the way the story went later. Beria went to walk around with Stalin in the Kremlin. He's exercising. He says, a funny thing happened. Yesterday I received a phone call. Somebody by the name of Alexander Vasilyevich Kontraktov is in trouble, and they're holding them there. They're going to shoot him because they were spies. They were dressed in German uniforms. And Stalin said, why don't you tell me? He says, tell you what? He says, it's my man. He says, I didn't know you have somebody with that name. You don't have to know everything. Call him back. We were already being walked out to the trees, and we would have gotten shot. When the colonel came running, he was out of breath. Parajiti, he kept yelling, hold it, hold it. Thank God, I lived. When I started working for Khruschev, the war wasn't on. The Nazis weren't murdering my families. When I worked for Stalin, I was more loyal to the Soviet cause than I was when I worked for Khruschev. The Soviet army had Jewish members in the army, because after all, Soviets had Jews. And when you get drafted, it doesn't matter the nationality. You get drafted, you get a uniform, you get a gun, and you go to the front. When the Nazis took prisoners, they separated the Jews from the Gentiles. They used to put Jews in a barn, a school, and light it up. They didn't take them to war prisoner camps. It was an automatic death. So most Jews would rather die on the front fighting for the fatherland that's not theirs than to get caught and wind up being burned to death. My father was executed as an example. My father was a rabbi, as I told you. And we had the head rabbi, what we refer to as a Rosh Yeshiva. The word Rosh is the head of the theological seminary. He was walking slow when they tried to put him into the ghetto, and the Nazis just executed him because he was walking slow. But the man was 86 years old, could barely walk. What the Nazis did, they put that old rabbi in the front of the gate of the ghetto. So everybody in the ghetto can see the punishment you receive when you disobey. In the Jewish tradition, you're supposed to bury the person same day or the following day, unless it's after sundown on Friday, then the body can lay until Sunday. There are no Jewish funerals on Saturday, Sabbath. My father was with his family in that particular ghetto. He bribed one of the Wehrmacht guards near the gate to allow him to go out the gate and bring the rabbi in for burial, which is the custom, the duty of any Jew, not just one rabbi to another. Just as about he was pulling that rabbi in to the gate, the Gestapo officer came by and asked my father what he was doing, and he says, tradition tells us that we're supposed to bury the body. He says, I put him there for purpose, not for you to take him away. And they hung my father for disobeying an order. And then they took the rest of the family out, except for one brother. That brother was paying off a Ukrainian with gold to hide him. 4 days before the Russians retook the city, he ran out of gold. And the Ukrainians turned him over to the Wehrmacht and they shot him. So out of the 10 children, we were 7 boys and 3 girls. I have one brother in Israel that survived. Best of my knowledge, there was something a little over 11 million people that were murdered by the Nazis during the period when Hitler came to power, and he started the concentration camps, I believe, late 1941 or early 1942. 6 million were Jews, men, women, and children.
Who were the others, and why were they executed?
Gypsies and Germans that did not measure up to the blue eyes, blonde, tall Germans. If he was an invalid, if he was retarded, they executed him. And they put him in those crematoriums. They murdered their own people. Those were the other 5 million. They were mainly gypsies that they picked up in Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary, because Hungary had a lot of gypsies. When Stalin wanted to use President Roosevelt to open up the second front sooner rather than later, when in 1943, when President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill came to